Really great to see you this afternoon, and what a privilege to speak to you. And I once knew a guy called Wayne Lee, and Wayne had an ambition. He said, what I'd like to do is I want to lead 250,000 people to Christ. And I just think, wow, that's crazy. And actually, through the system that he devised of discipleship and multiplication, he was well on the way to it. And I talked to Wayne one time and said to him, what's your secret? And he said, Mark, you've just got to keep showing up. And basically, today, I'm going to speak to you about being consistent in an inconsistent world. To try and do that, staying consistent in an inconsistent world. Can you come with me to the scriptures? It's really great to see you today. And let me point you to a really unusual and yet really seminal scripture that I just hope kind of sits in your scripture. Because I want you, it sits in your soul, because I want you to see something about Samuel, the prophet Samuel. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 7, and have a look at verse 15. But in a sense, what I'd like you to do is kind of just copy this verse, because I think it's really important for all of us in ministry. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 15 says this. Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. So he consistently served the Lord. He, with all his hopes, with all his ambitions, with all his dreams, he said, this is what I'm going to do. And then in verse 16 it says this. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. So just pause there. This was his triangle. Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah. Back to Bethel, back to Gilgal, back to Mizpah, back to Bethel, back to Mizpah, Gilgal. It doesn't seem like he even crisscrossed. This is what I call Samuel's triangle. And you know, today, I wish for you Samuel's triangle. That you can find joy in saying, this is what I do. This is what I do. I'm not looking for this or this or this or this, because in this is who I am called to. From Samuel, he says, I went from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in all those places. Then it says this. But he always went back to Ramah, where his home was, and there he also held court for Israel, and he built an altar there also. In his circuit, he didn't neglect home and invited people to his home. I just want to just lay this before you, that one of the greatest things that you can be is just consistent. And we'll have our highs, we'll have our lows, but there's a great secret in our lives if we can enjoy the circuit. If we can say, you know what, I do church, I do this, and actually I involve my home. And if you can get there and be consistent, you will make a great difference over time. You know, when I was growing up, we didn't have hundreds of channels. In fact, I want that sky glass. Does anybody else want that? That looks great. I've got Virgin TV at the minute. Other availability, other things are available. But I just think that looks really great. I love all the channels. I don't want to go back to 4 channels and all the rest of it. But when I was growing up, often it would say, the channel would break down, and then there'd become a little card that says, normal service will be resumed shortly. And unfortunately, I think what's happening in society now is we're all waiting for normal service to be resumed. But this isn't going to happen. It isn't happening any time, anywhere near. We're not going to get normal service. And there are many opinions of what normal is. One of our important realizations in leadership is to say it's not going back to what we think is normal. Can we just agree that? And now I don't say that with any sort of trepidation. I don't say that with any sort of sense of, we wish it would go back. I actually want to just say, God's going to be God. It's going to be okay. We're going to do well. And possibly we need to think through what our new normal is after COVID. I want to just to kind of say just one or two things, put a few things up there. I think we've got to think through our online hybrid thing. I'm not really sure, and I think it's our challenge together to do it. I'm not really sure that our online offer is all what it's supposed to be right now. And I think it's incumbent on us as younger leaders to say, how do we really engage people who are watching us online? And what is that offer, and how authentic is that? I'm not saying we shouldn't have that. I think that's just something to think through. I think more than ever before, more people want to be involved in church as far as planning it. When I first came into the ministry, basically the minister made up the service, what was going in it. And now you've got to be able to include much more people in it, because what COVID has done is that people have had access more than ever before in the planning. We're going to have flatter leaderships, more people involved in the decision making. And of course, diversity now is not the option that it was, that it actually isn't an option anymore. That we have to be diverse in everything that we do. There needs to be more fairness in the workplace, especially around bullying. So our language has got to be a lot different than what it used to be. And basically, authenticity in our leadership is not just something that, if you get it, is something that is good. It's actually required, because all our heroes, or not all of them, but many of our heroes, they're falling, aren't they? And we've all kind of been touched with this kind of real shift in what's happened in leadership. But here's something I'm going to come back to later on. One of the moves that have happened through COVID is that the pastoral and the prophetic now need to sit together. It used to be that somebody was either a prophet or they were either a pastor. And you might say, well, my gift does move towards one of them. But actually, one of the moves that's happened through COVID is that the pastoral, that sense of care and well-being is really important to people. But at the same time, the sharpness of revelation and direction needs to come through in our churches, because people are not looking for a bland sandwich anymore, or being faithful and just being loyal. In that sense, what they want is something that's sharp and something that can direct them and lead them. But although all of these things, and you may have your own list, and although all of these things have changed the church, and we are in a changing landscape, even though all of that's true, and they've moved our reality, there are some things that have not changed. There are some people in this room that you don't want to go to Gilgal, to Bethel, to Mizpah, back to Gilgal, to Bethel, to Mizpah. That actually, you'd rather just be whatever you want to be at that time. And I want to say to you today that if we're really going to move things forward, we need to put some kind of building blocks of just consistency in our lives. Is everybody okay and with me so far? Apart from the front row. Anybody further back? If we're going to resume what should not be lost, we've got to keep our consistency and enjoy it and begin to find God in those things. So I want to just kind of just share a few things, just these 5 things about what would help you keep your consistency in your leadership. And in a sense, this might be the most boring talk in the whole of ELS, because my only goal is to say, make sure you put these things in and keep going. That's basically what I want to say to you today. First of all, if you're going to remain consistent, you will have, and I hate to say the word, a program. Everybody talks against, we don't want a program, we want the presence. But if you lead a ministry, you're going to have some events, some teams, some purpose, some things that your ministry needs to have. And you're going to have to devise some goals for that ministry and for that program. You're going to have to set out a set of activities that people come to. Everybody's talking about we're back in the room. Why should we come back in the room if it's not worth coming back in the room for? You will need a set of kind of goals that you say, well, why are we coming back in the room? Now, here's the thing. Here's the difference. To get people back in the room and to get them involved in a program and actually part of a set of events, you're going to have to give people more lead-in time and give them less events. So more lead-in time, but less events. And as you do that, then momentum will build in your program. Some of us have perhaps got too little lead-in time and too many events. And we wonder why our program isn't quite, gaining momentum. If you will back it up and say, okay, I'm going to give people more lead-in time so that they know what's coming, more planning, but less events to come to, then momentum will build. Does that help a little bit? Stop wondering what should happen and start offering something solid. It's really important. Now, when we offer a program, we have to know the reason why we're offering it. What is the purpose of our activities? You say, I'm going to do this because we are trying to produce that. And always keep that end in mind. Rather than just saying, well, we've all been locked up, so we just need to be back together. People now need a reason why you're bringing them out of the house. So first and foremost, if you're going to keep your consistency, make sure that you offer a program. Now, I hate to speak like this, but the second thing is we are all going to have to look at our own personal performance. That actually the kind of, it's not an excuse, but the kind of thing as well, it's just me, and I just do what I do. Actually, we've all got to get some friends around us and be self-reflective and think to ourselves, what is my performance like? We have to keep the quality of our ministry offer up. Now, of course, that's through prayer and through preparation. I'm not talking just about being slick, although most ministers who do really well put as much time into preparing how they're going to perform as they do in just preparing. And you might want to reflect on How do I come across? If you're going to keep your consistency up, you've got to reflect on your performance. Now, when I was in BCC, Kathy used to hate it when I say, turn to your neighbor and say this. And I've fallen back into it in KT, and they seem to like it a lot better than BCC. But there's some KT folks here, and they're going to reflect back on my performance later on and say, actually, we don't like that. But your performance through prayer and preparation, working on how you implement what you offer, is really important. And I think it's really important that us as younger leaders actually begin to reflect on that we don't just fall into church habits, that we begin to say, how actually do I come across? And as you work on that, your consistency goes stronger, because over time, it's really important for you to be consistent. Third thing is priorities. If you're going to be consistent, you have to decide your key priorities and say no to the rest. We all say that we do this, but come on, let's all admit it, we don't, do we? It's really hard to work to priorities. You've built a rhythm, you've built a team, and it's just rolling. But unless you fulfill what you think is the most important, you'll just be busy. So until the priorities happen, don't move on to other things. That's so hard, isn't it? Especially when people are asking us to do many things. But I just wonder at this conference, and maybe this afternoon, perhaps if you could say to yourself, actually, my priority of a worship leader is this next year, we are going to create just a cohort of great singers. And we're going to make that our priority. Or if you are in pastoral care or in youth work, that you're going to say, I am going to raise up 5 new leaders. That's just my priority. And as you work towards priorities and you just kind of set them, and you have to manage the rest. You have to manage the rest through teams. You have to manage the rest through relationships. But if you as a leader will say, you know what, I've just got to get these priorities done, and don't move on until those are done and you can begin others, you will increase your consistency. My only goal today is to kind of gently input into your life to say, come and run consistently for a long time. Be like Samuel. Go through the triangle. It will be great. The triangle will become a drudgery if you don't bring your consistency up. And actually, when it says that Samuel was judging Israel, it meant that he was having revelation in those ordinary spaces. I really want to encourage you. Ministry is great, even if it's ordinary. Amen? It is. Fourth thing, if you're going to be consistent and stay consistently at ministry, you have to look at your personhood. Now, how many are good at taking your own temperature? You have to think to yourself and figure out a lot of times how you are doing. And one of the things about leadership is that we often look to other people and gauge how we're doing by other people. And that's appropriate that we do receive input. But it's really important that you begin to say, I can take my own temperature, and I know how when I'm not doing so well and when I'm feeling under pressure, you have to figure out what you need and get it regularly. Now, I know that sounds just really simplistic, But just for a moment, I wonder how self-reflective you are. And I don't know whether you keep a journal or whether you keep a notebook. But I wonder if you could begin to say to yourself, what do I need? Friendships, stroke emotionality, what do I need? Affirmation-wise, what do I need? And begin to organize your life so you say, I am going to protect my personhood. Stop letting exceptions become the rule, where you say to yourself, you know what? Those people are really mean to me, but I'm just serving them. And you keep allowing that meanness in your life. Don't. Put a barrier there. Put a boundary there. Stop letting exceptions become your rule. Begin to think, what do I need to keep myself healthy? Is it that, oh no, I'm going to go out and do one extra ministry assignment and burn the candle at both ends, and actually the exception becomes the norm? I wonder if you are living in an exception instead of what the natural rhythm should be. It's really important that you protect your personhood. You see, there's a difference between living at the top of a challenge, which motivates you. Here's how you can tell the difference. A challenge will motivate you. Stress will demotivate you. So if you're living at the top of a challenge, you're thinking, man, this is hard, but I'm enjoying it. Living in stress is, I don't really know what's going on here, and this is hard, and it's demotivating. I wonder if you can just protect your personhood by understanding the difference between the motivation of challenge and the demotivation of stress. I wonder if people and relationships can be into our lives whereby we stop rescuing everybody or appeasing people, but actually work out, who am I investing in? Because as a leader, you've got to begin to invest in people, not just rescue people. There's a lot to say about personhood, but I wonder where your challenge is today in kind of making yourself, and because, hang on, let me just back up. I'm saying to you a phrase, you've got to take your own temperature, stop making yourself. Can I just get you a secret here? As much as we live in community and as much as we live in relationships, you also have to join in your own health. Stop looking to everybody else to fix you. And of course, you need to ask for help if you need help, but you have to join in your own health. It's really important. So if you're going to stay consistent, understand that you have to guard and look after your own personhood. So I'm sharing with you just 5 things. The first thing I said today is that you're going to have to run a program. And it's really important that you make sure that that program is solid, that you know why it's happening, and you know why and what is the outcome of it. You're going to have to be reflective about your own performance and actually make it better. Keep working on that, because as you work on that, your consistency will come up. You're going to have to think through, what are the priorities of my ministry? What are the most important things that we are doing? And that's really important. It's so hard. It's probably the hardest thing in ministry, is to keep the priorities front and center. But fourthly, what I said to you is that you're going to have to think through your personhood and think to yourself, I'm not like that person, but I need these things for me. And begin to work on that and make sure that you have the things that keep you healthy. If you're going to stay consistent, you cannot neglect yourself. Now, I wrote a little scheme for myself. Every week I have 4 Ps that I work through. And the first one is personal, and then I work through a program, and priorities, and then people. Those are the 4 things that I do every single week. It's like my Samuel triangle. I go, okay, But the first thing that I do is write down, what do I need to do for me personally? And that's the top of the list. And I know that we're in my age group, when we were growing up, it was Jesus first, others second, yourself last, because J-O-Y was joy, Jesus, others, and yourself last. And we're supposed to sacrifice. I don't know. I just go, look, what do I need this week? Because I'm trying to keep myself healthy. And actually, I've been a minister now for 40 years. And I want to finish well. And so I just want to say to you, don't, you've got to do the other things, but don't neglect your personhood. But actually, if you will input into that, some of the other things will work out really well. Now, there are some people who are only interested in their personhood. But I want to say to you, you're going to have to run a program. You're going to have to be good at doing that, because you're inviting people to come to a public square. You're going to have to say what is on offer. But lastly, and with this I kind of want to close, I believe one of the differences that we've got to do today is that we've got to merge the prophetic and the pastoral together. That actually, this is time for prophets and shepherds to come together. That people, more than ever before, need care. But when we talk about being a shepherd, actually, it isn't just putting your arm around people. It's practical ways of improving their lives. Shepherds give people practical ways of improving their lives. Whether you're a youth leader, worship leader, pastor, whatever ministry you run, you've got to begin to say, how can I practically improve people's lives? Because shepherds nurture, feed, and guide. Nurture, feed, and guide. And actually, there are too many people who are in the ministry who delegate that out. But even if you're not ultra-pastoral, you've got to begin to say, you know what? How can I practically improve people's lives? If you are leading a ministry, everybody in that ministry say, how can I improve that person's life and their connection to Christ? But secondly, people need revelation and direction. In this confusing time that we are in, we have to be really good at giving biblical insight. And obviously it comes through the Bible, but also people, as well as care, they need revelation and direction. And so what I would say to you as far as just kind of being consistent is always think every week, how can I improve the quality of what's happening in this ministry? How can I hear what God is saying? Now, that may not come through a lightning bolt, but you may want to say, hey, here's a fresh insight that I have from the scriptures. I wonder whether maybe the most important thing we can do is to kind of say, I want to stop the noise of too many inputs. I don't know how many podcasts you signed up to, but I've kind of started to limit mine down a bit and kind of move some out and just not listen to some for a while. Stop the noise of too many inputs, because consistency is key. And everybody's telling us what to do. I don't know whether I could ask you to stand with us just for a moment. But I want to say something to you that's kind of so practical that it might not be brilliant. But here's the thing. Can I ask you, only listen to those people who are helping you produce fruit? For a season, maybe for the next 2 years, maybe the next year, that you only listen to those people who are helping you produce fruit. Now, please, let me just put some color around what I'm saying. I don't mean that it's not good to have some intellectual stimulation where you think, oh, I'm not sure about that, I need to think that through. I'm talking about consistency. Have a go-to source where you say, that person helps me. And when they speak to me, I get to do things and I produce fruit. Can I deposit that in your life? Can I just say to you that if you're receiving from people and it's just stirring you up and confusing you or upsetting you or stimulating you, but you do nothing with it, find somebody else. Stop the noise. Because my only goal today is to help you think through your own consistency. That's all. There'll be other talks that maybe may equip you in other areas. My only goal is to say, how are you going to go from Bethel to Mizpah to Gilgal for the rest of your life and enjoy it? That doesn't mean to say that you'll be stuck in the same place and, you're thinking, oh my Lord. I don't mean that. I mean, how are you going to be consistent in serving the Lord, knowing that you're just enjoying it? You stop looking for every other opportunity and think, you know what? I'm happy doing this triangle. And then I actually go back to Ramah sometimes with my family, and I invite Israel there, a whole court with them there, and we have a great family celebration because I built an altar where my family is. It's a great lesson in Samuel's life. In fact, if you look at Samuel's life, you hear him as a child in the temple, that's it. Then you hear him appoint Saul, and in the middle is the triangle. You find nothing else about him. You look it up. Last thing I want to say to you is, after conference, look at 4 seasons from now. Just try and look at 4 seasons and only plan that. See the rhythm of what you want to happen by next June, not this June, by next June. If you want to be consistent, think through what you're going to do in the summer, what you're going to do in the autumn. I missed the autumn. What you're going to do next winter, and what you're going to do next spring. Just think of that. Because my only goal is to get you to walk through a triangle. 5 little things that you could look at your program and offer something solid. That you could look at your own performance and say, how can I get better and actually more meaningful? That you could think of some priorities that God gives you, that you think are important. That you would arrest those attacks on your personhood. That you would say, you know what, I'm not going to live in all these exceptions. And that you would say, I'm going to care for people, but I'm going to try and direct people. Cut out the noise and plan 4 seasons. I wonder if you'd perhaps reach over to somebody next to you and just put your hand on their shoulder and just pray into their lives something of what you've heard today. Let's just take just a moment. Thank you, Lord. And we're going to wrap up in just 2 minutes. But would you perhaps just chat to somebody just for 1 minute? I'll bring you back in just to worship in a moment. Would you say to the person next to you what has been the most helpful thing for you in this talk that you need to take on board? Would you confess that out loud to somebody? Okay. And if you say nothing, then I'll just receive prayer from you. Just have a little chat to somebody and say, hey, I think this is what I need to bring on board for me. Father, I just pray. Thank you, Lord. I just wonder today, I hope that I've been able to say just something clearly, that what this world needs now, and actually our generation, your generation, we have to go for consistency. And that isn't boring. We'll be charismatic. There'll be revelation in the triangle, but you've got to enjoy the consistency of doing it over a long time. So start thinking, God, I may not hit some heights, but how can I build my consistency to the next level?